Do you have any other thoughts there on that that dismissal into mythology? Because it seems like looking through the lens with the modern scientific mind, we can dismiss a lot of these experiences and encounters and writings as though it's just pure hearsay and mythology, you know?
It's a poor understanding of mythology. That's what it is. We say something like, oh, well, Bigfoot's just a myth. It's that just a myth part. The myths were never meant to be taken completely literally, and they were never meant to be dismissed as stories. Mythology lives in a world where every single human being lives. They're a way of parsing the world through symbolic systems. And I don't care how much of a skeptic, how much of a materialist, how much of a scientist you are, we're always parsing the world through sets of symbols. We are meaning-making creatures. And again, if you want proof of that, just look at how meaningless many of us are experiencing life these days. We're having a meaning crisis. It's affecting all of us at some deep, fundamental way. And so the myths are one of the ways that we parse and generate those systems of meaning. And so sometimes people ask me, like, given what you know, how can you be religious? And it says, well, I can be religious because I take my myths very seriously. I don't take them literally. And no one can force me to take them literally. And in history, no one did either. It was some combination of I take them seriously and not literally. Okay. And in some sense, that's more liberating because the mythology now is allowed to live, and it doesn't have to be pinned down to these 3 words literally happen in this way. It's a prison. It's a prison of the mind, literalism. But you can say, no, there is a there behind these words that is powerful in terms of its meaning-making capacity. And myths are the way that we do that. And it's funny because you'll have scientists, and again, not to bash the scientists, but because I'm on their team, I'm one myself in a way. But they'll say things like, oh, well, those are just myths. And I'm like, you tell yourselves myths too. For instance, one of the great myths that we love to tell is that Isaac Newton sort of was a totally rational guy and developed physics and the theory of color and calculus, blah, 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 because he was born out of Isaac Newton's rationality. I'm like, Isaac Newton wrote more on the occult than he did on calculus. He was thinking about the infinite, not because he was interested purely in the math. He was interested in it because he was interested in the nature of God. And he was writing more alchemy than he was about optics. You have this myth about rationality, right? About how Descartes invented modernity. Like, and through skeptical doubt. That's how we get to modernity, through skeptical doubt. Until you actually read Descartes, in which he tells you he had a mystical dream in which a divine being came to him and revealed to him the method that became the Cartesian method. Like, you're curating your story of modernity because you don't like the part where he has the mystical dream. But the mystical dream led to the skeptical method. And if you don't tell the whole story, you're engaging in a kind of myth-making.
Yeah.
And I think it's intellectually dishonest and it's dangerous because it ultimately ghettoizes this incredibly important part of the human experience, which is Descartes had a mystical dream. Isaac Newton was just as interested in the occult. Kepler was just as interested Kepler's mother was accused of witchcraft. These guys are the foundations of modernity. They have their foot in both of these worlds. And if we don't tell that side of the story, then what are we doing? Like, what are we really doing?
So well said. And I am really looking forward to diving into the distortion and the curation of the story of modernity, in your words, because it's a pervasive tale.
It is. Incredibly deleterious to us. And I think it's led to this meaning crisis. Part of what's led to the meaning crisis is that we have let people tell us a lie about the development, about modernity. And that lie has robbed us of some of the most important spiritual technologies of what it is to be human. Like when we're robbed of the power of myth, we're robbed of meaning.
Yeah.
And for me, as a person who's deeply committed to the Enlightenment, deeply committed to modern scientific rationality, all of that, you can only do that if you're being intellectually honest. And the intellectual honesty has to come with, you don't get to take the part out where Descartes had that weird dream. You don't get to take the part of Parmenides out where Parmenides is led to deductive analytic metaphysics by a vision of a goddess. you don't get to cut that part off because it makes you uncomfortable. And the mystics don't like the analytic part, and the analytic part isn't liked too much by the mystics don't like the analytic people don't like the mystical part. And the job, I think, when you do history right, is to make everybody uncomfortable. And when everyone's uncomfortable, we're getting somewhere. But when the scientists are comfortable telling their version of the story and the mystics are comfortable telling their version of the story, and they can sit in their own siloed camps, that silo, that is the death of intellectual growth. It's the death of spirituality. And I'm like, no, this is the uncomfortable middle that I'm trying to show in the work that I do.
Yeah, and it's the birth of immense hubris. I've heard many different modern intellectuals and scientists completely dismiss Newton's writings on alchemy as just complete hearsay, and like all this stuff that he wrote was just, garbage over here, and his useful stuff was the calculus.
The calculus, yeah.
Which I understand. Like, one bears fruits in a way that is useful for everybody, right? The other is convenient to the story we've been bred into, of just putting that to the side. But how do you make, because I think it's James Campbell's conception of the psychotic drowns in the same water the mystic swims in with the light. So how do you make sense of what is actually coherent mystical experiences and the writings and sayings that come from them, and discern between straight up hallucinations and psychosis versus people that seem to be touching a coherent, profound, transcendent reality that seem like they're kind of swimming in the same water, but there is a difference.
Sure, and sometimes I guess it's not my job to judge,
Totally.
right? It's like I get to be like, I don't really know. Like, was William Blake, was he crazy? I'm like, yeah, he can be crazy and true. Like, it's not, I question these kind of dichotomies that we build for ourselves where, at the end of the day, I look at some of these texts and say, is this the ravings of a mad person, or is this, or what Lang said, that not all breakdowns are breakdowns, some breakdowns are breakthroughs. And my task is to look at the text with what I call sometimes a critical sympathy. Critical in the sense that I'm bringing to bear all the tools that I have access to. And it's an admittedly small group of tools, honestly. Philosophy, logic, science. I'm going to bring to bear all those tools. And my job is to go to the text, the mystical text, and say, this makes sense. That's my North Star. There's a reason this person wrote this because it made sense to them. My job is to get in their head as best I can and find where that sense making is happening. And I was just working on a Gnostic text called the Untitled Treatise. It's so difficult to understand that scholars just can't even give it a title. They just don't know what's going on in it. It's so bewildering. And my job is to get into the text and say, no, it makes sense. It's a me problem when there's no sense, And so I throw everything I have at it. And at some point, I'm going to hit a wall and say, I just don't know what's happening in this text. But this is the best we got, right? And, if I get to the text where it's completely just incoherent, then I say, like, I've reached the limits of what I can do with this material. And does that mean the text is incoherent? It might, but I should be humble enough to say it might just be a me problem. Maybe this text was written for people initiated in mysteries where it was meant to be performative. It was read out loud in a performance setting, and it was meant to induce a certain kind of consciousness. And therefore, it's not the job of the text to actually be making sense in an analytical way. It's meant to induce a state. That's totally possible. And so the task at that point is to step back and say, okay, I'm not able to understand it in a straightforward, literal, logical sense. Let's think bigger.